Hello, in this presentation we will record the payment of sales tax within QuickBooks Pro 2018. If you've been working along with us, we will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. If not, that is okay. We will be recording the sales tax that we have been collecting throughout the time when we have been selling inventory to the state using the Manage Sales Tax icon here. If you have the backup to this point, you can file and restore that backup, taking us to the current point in time so that we are paying hopefully the same amount of sales tax and we can follow along with that. We currently have the open windows open. In order to have open windows open, you go to the View tab and open window list, and that'll give you the open window list in which we only have the Home tab open. In order to open the Home tab, if the Home tab is not currently open, Company and Home tab. So in this presentation, we're going to take a look at managing the sales tax, in essence, paying the sales tax. So let's quick discussion. What is sales tax? How are we getting sales tax? Where is it coming from? And how do we pay it? Remember that sales tax is a bit of a tricky item in that it will differ from state to state and place to place, country to country. And it is generated, could be a value added tax, but it's basically going to be the tax on sales. So when we create, in essence, a invoice or create a sales receipt, dependent on the location within the states, it would be dependent on which state we are in as to the sales tax. We'll have different sales tax amounts that will be recorded and then need to be paid to the state or local governments, whoever is collecting those sales tax. In order to set that up, we set the sales tax properties up within the setup process, and you can go to the edit and preferences to set that up and go to then the lists. And if we go to item list, the item lists, then we can see that our sales tax items will be here, our sales tax items being this 5%. Within this item, then if we edit this item, we will have the information regarding the sales tax. The sales tax is going to be the 5% and the description, and then who we're paying it to. In this case, we're just saying New York State sales tax. This is not an actual problem. This is just going to be an example of where the sales tax is going. So do not take this as an actual rate. It's just an example rate of a nice easy 5% that we will then pay to some state organization. And note that that will change depending on where, I'm going to close that out obviously, and that will change depending on where you are at. So you have to know where your sales tax, what it will be, and then set it up whatever that is in terms of the sales tax that will be drawn out and the rate, and then just the vendor. All that really is the vendor who we're going to pay it to. Once that is set up, QuickBooks really does a lot of it for you then. So if we close this back out, when we create an invoice, if we just take a look at one of these invoices that have been created and scroll back to an invoice that has been created, we have an invoice here and we have an item we sold, which is a guitar. It was a $400 guitar and we took 5% of that, the sales tax rate, to get $20. That $20 then is what we are collecting on top of the $400, then collecting $420. 20 of it, however, not ours, 20 of it something that we owe in the future, 20 of it then being recorded as a liability rather than part of the revenue account. So if we close this back out, that's where the sales tax is being generated. And we see that also if we go to the create sales receipt. This would just be similar to an invoice, except we received payment at that point in time. And same item where we have the item being purchased, a guitar in this case, cost $500. 25% flat sales tax rate, and that brings it up to $525. So that's where it's being collected in terms of the money being collected. We're getting the revenue plus the sales tax. When it's recorded, note that if we look at the financials and go to reports, go to company and financial, scroll down to the balance sheet, and if we change the date range in the customized report to 01/01/21 12/31/21 and OK, we see this information here and we scroll down to the sales tax payable. We have the sales tax amount there. If we double click on that, we see the amounts that are being generated, 20, 19, 20, around the same because we're selling guitars. If we click on any of these, notice they're either invoices in terms of the item or sales receipts. If we click on either of those, we're going to get that related invoice or sales receipt. Closing that out. Note that most of the time the sales tax is going to be on physical goods. So if we have services, we may not have to have sales tax depending on the location. On services, it's usually tangible goods like inventory. If we close this out, now of course we need to pay that. Now the payment depends state to state as well. It might be that you pay it every month. It might be that you pay it every quarter. You're going to have to basically set that process up in terms of whatever the regulations are. But you're going to collect it throughout the time period, whether it be a month or a quarter or even a year, and then you're going to pay it. When we pay it, obviously what the journal entry will be is that we're going to write a check and we're going to decrease cash and we are going to decrease the payable here. Instead of just writing a check, however, we can use QuickBooks' nice little feature up here. It's in the Home tab. We are in the Home tab and we're in the Vendor section. And we will be managing the sales tax. So that is what we will use in order to pay the sales tax due at this time. If we look at the sales tax screen that we then see, we could see that run some reports that might make it useful for us to see this information. One is the sales tax liability. If we select that, we might be just paying the sales tax for 01/01/21, the first month, 01/31/21. And just be paying the sales tax related to that first month here. And it'll generate the total sales, the non-taxable sales, and then the tax rate and give us the tax collected just in this case in January. Oftentimes us paying on a monthly basis. So in February we would pay off January and so on. So if we close that out, looking at the remaining items, we could take a look at the view sales tax items. If we select that, we're going to get a quick view of just the items, meaning same thing as if we went to the lists and we went to the item lists. And we're looking for just that sales tax item, however. We only have the one to the one state. If we were in multiple states, we would have multiple sales tax items possibly. And next item, it says Open Sales Tax Code Lists. If we take a look at that, we've got the sales, taxable sales, non-taxable. What that is when we look at the invoice, we can either choose that it'll be taxable or non-taxable, and that'll apply the sales tax or not. If we then go to the Adjust Sales Tax Due, if for whatever reason the sales tax that we have is not correct and we need to make the adjustment, we can increase or decrease by that amount here, thereby making the check for the correct amount that we need to make the check for at that point. The sales tax preferences item here is a quick shortcut. Rather than going to the edit and preferences, we can just go straight to the sales tax preferences, and that will go to that preferences item under the sales tax tab, and we can adjust the preferences here as needed. So we've got do you charge sales tax? Yes, so that's where we have to turn on the sales tax. If you don't have that on, then you would go to edit and preferences, and you can find this tab and turn it on if you can't get to this point in time. And then add sales tax item, that's going to be our sales tax. Taxable item is tax or non-taxable none. Identify taxable items with a T. As invoices are due, when do you owe sales tax? When they're due. And then when do you pay sales tax? We're going to do it monthly rather than quarterly or annually. Typically, many places, if you have the more sales tax you have, the shorter the time period. So if you don't make a lot of sales, possibly you'd have it quarterly. If you make a lot of sales, you're probably going to have to pay it monthly. If you don't make really a lot of sales, then you could probably do it possibly annually. So it depends from state to state and location to location. And if we go to the My Preferences, nothing on the My Preferences tab. So we're going to say OK in terms of for the sales preferences. Finally, we will select Pay Sales Tax. So we're going to pay the sales tax. We're going to have the check date is going to be 02/28/21. It's not going to be the current date, of course. We are working a problem in the future. So it says show sales tax due through 9/30/17. Now, of course, that's not the date we are working. I'm going to put that to 01/31/21. So the January, the first month we were working in, we're going to pay it at the end of February. Then we're going to go ahead and select that. So we're selecting that item to be paid, and we're going to keep everything else the same. We're not going to clear selections. We're not going to adjust it. And the ending bank balance is given here as well. Check number should be correct. So we're going to say, okay, note that we're not going to print the check. We're just going to have the check number. If you were to print the check, then we would have to have the check that we would then put into the printer in the format, and it would then print the check for us. So we're going to say OK, and there is that item. If we close this out and take a look at the forms, let's see what is going on. We're going to close this out. We're going to go back to our balance sheet, and we're going to scroll down. Sales tax is here. If we double click on the sales tax, we then see that we have this payment of $123.37. Double clicking on that $123.37, we see our check being generated from that process. If we close this back out and close this back out, the other side of it is of course in the checking account up top in the assets section. There's the checking account. Double clicking on the checking account, scrolling to the bottom, we see that same item, the $123.37. Double clicking there is our check once again. If we close this back out, one other place it's nice to check this stuff is when we're dealing with the bank account is the check register. Often people like the check register. It's comforting to see the check register. It's familiar to see the check register. So if we go to the use check register, we're in our checking account, and we're going to say OK, and there is our check register where we wrote this check right there. If we double click on it, it gives us another little tag here, tax payment, because we use that special sales tax rather than just writing a normal check where we just have that. We had a special check tax payment item. And if we double click right on that, then we will see that check, and that has been pulled up when we did that process and processed through that. So that will be the sales tax. Going back to the home tab, remember what we're doing here is paying that sales tax based on the sales that we had generated, made from the invoices generated and the sales receipts generated, and QuickBooks then tracking the amount that is due for us, compiling it, and giving us a nice little option to pay it at one time. Once that is set up, then this process is pretty easy to run through. Setting it up does take a little time. You got to make sure you have the preference on to set it up. You got to make sure you have the right item in there, the right state requirements in terms of the amount of sales tax, and the right item listed as to whether sales tax is due or not in accordance with the item that you're selling. Typically inventory items being the ones that are subject to sales tax. Clearly, if you have multiple states and multiple countries, then the sales tax becomes more complicated, and you got to make sure those items are set up correctly. Once set up, however, then QuickBooks really drives the process in terms of tracking what is owed and what can be paid and when it should be paid.